Hi, this is David Feldman, and it's the mop-up for May 12th, 2023. Title 42 expired this week, and Stephen Miller, Donald Trump's White House senior advisor on immigration, didn't write Title 42, which was passed in 1944. He simply discovered it and then used it to destroy millions and millions of lives. Under the guise of protecting Americans from COVID, the implementation of Title 42 turned out to be far crueler than the disease. In the past 3 years, America invoked Title 42 2.5 million times, sending women and children back to gang and drug-infested Central American countries, as well as Haiti, where they were met with certain poverty, as well as, according to Human Rights Watch, sexual assault, torture, and death. By 2020, the ACLU reported that Donald Trump, had invoked Title 42 to remove 13,000 unaccompanied minors escaping drug cartels, gangs, and poverty. We're talking about 13,000 minors as of 2020. That's the first year. The Trump White House's zero tolerance policy was devised by Stephen Miller, whose brainchild at the beginning was the flagrant separation of mothers from their children. This was as far back as 2017. Stephen Miller was trying to separate children from their parents. 2017, to send a clear message: do not come to the United States. You'd be hard-pressed to find an American more wicked than Stephen Miller, a xenophobe with ties to white nationalists. Miller insisted migrants were a public health risk and called for Donald Trump to invoke Title 42 on day one of the Trump administration. According to the New York Times, by 2018, Stephen Miller tried to convince the White House that cases of flu, measles, and mumps detected inside immigration detention centers served as enough evidence that migrants spread disease, and Trump would therefore be well within his emergency powers to invoke Title 42. Even though the spread of those diseases was caused by the negligence of Homeland Security, keeping detainees on top of one another. Human Rights Watch reports that the detainees came to America without COVID. They caught it here. Up until March of 2020, Stephen Miller met stiff resistance from White House lawyers on Title 42, but then came COVID. I have to fix something. It's driving me nuts. Hang on. Sorry. I have OCD, and this is driving me nuts. There we go. I can't do this without talking and saying Stephen Miller. Okay, sorry about that. As I said, up until 2020, Miller met stiff resistance from White House lawyers on Title 42, but then came COVID. While Donald Trump downplayed the severity of the virus, at the same time, he used it in 2020 as an excuse to invoke Title 42 and start removing migrants, including asylum seekers, and that is in direct violation of international law. You cannot turn away asylum seekers. Like COVID, Title 42 has been a political football. In May of last year, Joe Biden announced he would lift the Title 42 ban after the CDC said that, thanks to vaccines, migrants no longer posed a health risk. Biden's decision, of course, was immediately blocked by a conservative judge in Louisiana who said lifting Title 42 would inflict undue hardship on border states who would have to spend money on health care, law enforcement, schools, and other public services for these newly arrived migrants after Title 42 is lifted. But Title 42 is about stopping the spread of communicable diseases. That Republican judge, along with all these Republicans, they were just using Title 42 to keep migrants out. This was never about COVID. COVID was the excuse. And so an appeals court overturned that Louisiana judge's ruling. And like immigration, COVID, Title 42 became another political football. Democrats are no saints. During last year's midterms, many Democrats cared more about appearing tough than they did compassionate on immigration. Senators Mark Kelly of Arizona and Raphael Warnock of Georgia were running for re-election, and they campaigned saying they supported keeping Title 42 in place. The Reverend Raphael Warnock of Georgia said he supported Title 42. Kelly and Warnock were both reelected, which meant the Democrats kept the Senate and lost their soul. Now, if you're confused by all this Title 42 stuff, don't worry, you're supposed to be confused. Both parties have a strategic ambiguity when it comes to immigration. Immigration is like abortion. Both parties use it to fundraise, to scare, to virtue signal. They stake out positions that portray them as compassionate or deeply religious or tough. But when it comes to passing actual legislation that resolves the issue, they leave that to the courts. If you wonder why the Supreme Court is getting more and more powerful, it's because of the cowardice in our legislative branch. They refuse to tackle serious issues. Instead, they just use these serious issues, these life and death issues, to fundraise. On immigration, America historically has a horrible record because immigration, much like the work immigrants do, is seasonal. There's a different time and a different season for how we view immigrants. Sometimes America needs immigrants, so we let them in and refer to them as the lifeblood of our country. But sometimes we need to demonize immigrants, to blame them for all the failures of the ruling class. And so we frighten the immigrants, we terrorize them. Even worse, we destroy their family and their lives. There is a surge at the border, not a particularly bad one. They predicted that once Title 42 lifted, we'd see a tsunami of people trying to get over the border. That hasn't materialized. You will be told, if you watch Fox or Newsmax or OAN, that there's a surge. Nothing's changed. But there is a surge at the border. There are a lot of people trying to come into America. They are people primarily from poor Central American countries, as well as Haiti. And as climate change, as well as income inequality worsen, those numbers might increase unless we do something about climate change and the economic conditions in Central American Haiti that we are one of the causes of. We need to decide whether or not accepting asylum seekers is a good or a bad thing. I think you know that I believe it's the righteous thing to do, that we need them. There are little more than 11 million undocumented Americans out of 350 million of us. That number has remained pretty much consistent since the Great Recession of 2008. 3/4 of the 11 million undocumented Americans living here have been here for more than a decade, and many of them have children who were born here and are therefore American citizens. They are less prone to crime than American citizens. Plus, when they work, They pay into Social Security, and when they retire, they don't collect any. Immigrants, undocumented or otherwise, are a net plus for our economy, despite what the racists in the Republican Party want you to believe. We have some serious decisions to make when it comes to immigration. Unemployment is now the lowest since 1969. Unemployment is now the lowest since 1969. I'm going to talk to you like an adult. Nobody talks to the American people like an adult. These are some truths that we need to reckon with. Unemployment is now the lowest since 1969. And while corporations scream recession and continue to lay people off, other corporations are hiring and complaining there are too many jobs that can't be filled. It's kind of like what they did to us after 9/11. Be afraid, be very afraid, but don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, but be afraid. What they do with the economic numbers is they tell us corporations are laying people off, there's a recession, but we can't find anybody to fill these jobs. Despite recent rumblings of artificial intelligence replacing all of us, we need people to do the jobs that undocumented Americans tend to do. And those jobs cannot be done by artificial intelligence. We need people right now to pick our fruit and vegetables, dig our ditches, drive our Uber cars, drive our cabs, paint our homes, babysit our children, and wipe grandpa's ass. Those are really, really important jobs that artificial intelligence can't do. The people who do those jobs cannot be replaced. Maybe those are the people who should be paid the most in our society. They are truly irreplaceable. You can live without anything I do to make money. I always say in New York City, everybody's an intellectual until they need a plumber. And then the plumber is king. So these jobs that you don't want to do, you better start doing them because they're the most important jobs that need to be done. And they're being done partly by undocumented Americans. We need chefs, waiters, plumbers, waitresses, and electricians. AI will never be able to do that. We need people who can do things, and the refugees can, and we can't. Our cities are emptying out as many jobs no longer require offices. We need to fill our cities up with people. We have a shortage of people. Nobody will tell you this. I will. America's population isn't growing fast enough. We don't have enough people living in America to pay into Social Security to keep it going. We don't have enough people in America buying things, paying taxes on what they buy as well as what they earn. This is how civilizations die as the population decreases. Our population and most first world countries are suffering from population declines. Not good for the economy. It's why Canada is letting more and more people in. We need more people living in the United States. Now, the people at the border who have been demonized, the people who come to America, are identical to my grandparents who came to America. And they are identical to the monster Stephen Miller's grandparents, his Jewish grandparents. Stephen Miller and I both have Jewish grandparents. And they came to America for the identical reasons. His grandparents came from Russia for the same reason my grandparents came over. Now, I'll tell you why they came over in a second, and it's going to surprise you because you've been lied to about why Jewish grandparents came to America or why any immigrants come to America. Now, 10 years ago, most of the undocumented immigrants, I call them undocumented Americans. They're here. I don't even know if one of my grandparents ever became a citizen. 10 years ago, most of the undocumented Americans came from Mexico, and they were coming here specifically for work. That's over. Undocumented Mexicans are going back to Mexico. In recent years, it changes, it fluctuates, especially with COVID, but in the past 10 years, more undocumented Mexicans have moved back to Mexico than stayed here in the United States. Has anybody told you that? Google it. We have a net loss of undocumented Mexicans. They're going back to Mexico. What we have right now is a net gain of undocumented Central Americans and Haitians coming to America for the same identical reason my grandparents and Stephen Miller's grandparents came here: to seek refuge, to find safety. My grandparents and Stephen Miller's grandparents didn't come here for opportunity or work. They came here to escape the pogroms, the persecution, the early 20th century terrorism that eventually became the Holocaust. My grandparents and Stephen Miller's grandparents came here to escape rape, torture, and death. They were welcomed in America as cheap sources of labor. But that's not why our grandparents came here. They didn't come to America because it was the land of opportunity. They came to escape rape, torture, and certain death. Now, the Mexicans who were coming over were coming here for work. They were coming here for work and remittances. The children, the women, and the men coming from Central America and Haiti are escaping a brutality that Stephen Miller's grandparents and my grandparents would be quite familiar with. It's different. They are coming here. These migrants are seeking asylum. The Central American migrants are seeking asylum to escape political persecution from corrupt regimes propped up too often by America. They are not coming here to work. They are coming here to live, literally to live. We are not a nation of immigrants. Get that out of your effing head. America is not a nation of immigrants. We never were. We like to say we were, the same way we like to say we support the troops, even though only 1% of our population ever actually serves. Only 14% of the American population was born someplace else. 14% of our population was born someplace else. We are not a nation of immigrants. Back at the turn of the century, when this country started to let people in, when Stephen Miller's grandparents were let in, only 15% of this country was foreign born. So we have a fewer percentage of immigrants living in America than we did back when Stephen Miller's grandparents and my grandparents came to America. We have never been a nation of immigrants. Despite what it says on the Statue of Liberty, America does not accept refugees. I'd have relatives in Eastern Europe who'd be alive today if Franklin Roosevelt had accepted the refugees. We don't accept refugees. Stop flattering yourself, America. We are not a nation of immigrants, and we're not a nation that welcomes the dispossessed. Last year, the United Nations reported there are 100 million refugees worldwide. That's more than at any other time in recorded history. 100 million refugees worldwide, and America is responsible for a lot of them coming from Afghanistan, Iraq, and Russia's responsible for the ones coming out of Ukraine. Record number of refugees, 100 million worldwide. And yet, according to Vox, the number of refugees America accepts has been on a steady decline since 1980 and is now at a record low. This is going to be very upsetting. Very upsetting. I would assume Ron DeSantis wouldn't want this being taught in Florida schools. In 1980, America let in 207,000 refugees. Last year, we let in 10,700 refugees. All the people from Ukraine, Syria, the Sudan, all the refugees, right, that we talk about, we let in 10,700 refugees. Just as an example, the civil war in Syria created 5 million refugees. America took in, over the past 12 years, 20,000 Syrian refugees. Shame on America. Shame on America. How many times have we drawn a red line and said, if Assad uses nerve gas, we're going to drop a bomb? How many times have we sent weapons to Syria? 5 million refugees, and America has only taken in 20,000. Shame on you, America. We talk about the decline of this country as though it's inevitable, and it might be inevitable. Great powers decline when they are overextended militarily. That's a fact. And we are overextended militarily. We spend more on weapons than the rest of the world combined. We have money for bombs, but not for our civilization. We don't have the money for our people. We have enough money for bombs, but the debt ceiling, they may actually crash the economy because there's no money for Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Great civilizations decline when they do exactly what the Republicans want us to do, turn insular when they build giant walls keeping people out. The Great Wall of China brought on the demise of China. When you keep people out, you decline as a great power, because keeping people out turns you into a country that is intellectually and economically incestuous. You begin to look and act like Great Britain's royal family. Whatever greatness America has or had, and that's debatable, America, whatever greatness we've had, is not because of the immigrants who came here seeking a better life. Get that out of your head. We don't need the immigrants coming here because they want to study at Harvard or go work for Facebook. America's greatness comes from the immigrants who came here seeking life. We don't need the immigrants coming here to work as doctors, software engineers. I mean, they're welcome, right? but they don't really add as much to the flavor of our economy and our intellectual growth as the immigrants who come here seeking life do. Because those are the most loyal and American-loving immigrants, the ones who know they would be dead but for America. Einstein didn't come to America because he thought he could make more money or do better academically at Princeton. Einstein came to America because Hitler would have killed him. We are not a nation of immigrants. Get that out of your head. What we are, however, and this gives me hope, we are a nation that likes to believe we are a nation of immigrants. 75% of Americans, according to the latest Gallup poll, 75% of us think immigration is a net positive. We like the idea of immigrants. That's a start. Since we like the idea of immigrants, since we like the idea of taking in asylum seekers, we should start doing it. We have always, instead, feared immigrants, only accepted them when we needed them, and turned them away, especially during World War II. And right now, we're turning them away, just like during World War II. I'd have a lot more relatives, and Stephen Miller would have a lot more relatives if Franklin Delano Roosevelt listened to Henry Morgenthau and allowed more refugees from Europe into America. But we turned them away because we are not a nation of refugees and we're not a nation of immigrants. We are a nation surrounded by water, Mexico, and Canada. We do not welcome people into this country. To paraphrase Joe Biden, that's not who we are. We speak, if we're lucky, one language, barely, English. Most of us don't travel overseas. Most of us don't own a passport. We're not interested. And if somebody comes to this country and doesn't speak the language, we're dismissive. And that is why we're falling behind. That heralds the end of our civilization. Title 42 expired Thursday night. We're being warned that a tsunami of migrants will be swarming over the border. And yet, that tsunami, that fire hose of Spanish-speaking migrants, has never materialized. It won't materialize. America's Assistant Secretary for Border and Immigration said the day after Title 42 expired, nothing's changed at the border. Mexico's foreign minister said the number of migrants congregating along the border in cities like Juarez, about 10,000, which is the same as it was before Title 42. There's no swarm. In fact, Mexico reports the flow of migrants has dropped in the past week. They describe it as calm and normal. Now, Fox News, OWN, and Newsmax, they'll take video out of context and convince you there's a swarm of Spanish-speaking people coming for you. It's not true, and it never was. Those migrants who are at the border begging to come in, the truth is we need them as much as they need us. And as Dr. King said, if I'm wrong, God is wrong. Stephen Miller is a monster. Stephen Miller is a monster. And one of the few arguments for closing our borders. Maybe his grandparent. You know what? He's been disowned by his family. Stephen Miller has been disowned by his family. That is the face of a monster. Look at that. This is a guy who gets up every day and feels lousy about himself and is a sadist and came up with the idea of separating mothers from their children in 2017 to signal to Central America, don't come here. What kind of human does that? Somebody who's not human, somebody who is a monster. There are monsters among us. There are monsters among us. There is evil among us. Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, Steve Bannon, Ted Nugent, Ron DeSantis, Ted Cruz, Laura Ingraham, and what's her name from Georgia? Hey, I gotta go. Thank you for watching. We're going to do office hours at 8 p.m. It's going to be great. The creator of Bupkis, Dave Cyrus, is going to join us. The Reverend Barry W. Lynn, author of Paid to Piss People Off. Professor Mike Steinel, author of Saving Charlie Parker, a novel, will be joining us. Alan Minsky, the executive director of Progressive Democrats of America, is joining us. And Donald J. Trump. Now, they say it's Robert Smigel, but I don't believe it. Donald J. Trump will be joining us for office hours at 8 p.m. Eastern, Friday night, every Friday night. If you're watching me live, the link is in the description of the show, and you can participate in the recording of my podcast. So I hope to see you at 8 p.m. this Friday night. Tonight in about 45 minutes. Please like this episode. That ensures that you see more episodes of me. Please share this episode. I think this is kind of important to share. And what else? Oh, and please subscribe to my channel. And I'd like to thank the mods in the chat room who keep this place civil. I think that's it. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak.